Welcome to HCCLA's Reasonable Doubt. My name is Jay Julio Vela, and I, along with my co-host and the producer extraordinaire of the show, director Justin Harris. How are you, sir?
Good. Just like last week. Did I wear the same tie last week?
You know what, man? Every day you bring something different, so I doubt it.
So speaking of something different, what does the J stand for?
Jose.
Julio Vela?
Jose.
Jose Julio
Jose
Vela?
Julio Vela.
Yeah? What else? Let's talk a little more about you.
Well, so I like to use the name. I'm known by many names. Okay.
You have a daughter named
July.
July.
After me.
That's Spanish. That's English for Julio.
Right. It's English for Julio, but Spanish.
I think it's a great name, July.
English. I think so.
I had to stop calling you that when you said your daughter was named that.
Well, July's my other alter ego.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
July Vila.
July Candle. July Candle, man. Hey, it's July Candle.
So why do you do J Julio Vela?
My dad told me so my dad's name's Jose Julio Vela. I'm Jose Julio Vela Jr. Jose Julio Vela, for all you Mexicans watching. It's true. You got to say it right. Jose Julio Vela.
Jose Julio.
My dad one time told me, that he hated the name Jose.
Oh.
So that's why he went by Julio. And my mom thought Jose Julio Vela was too old school. And so she made the name JV, spelled Javy.
Oh.
And so I didn't know my name wasn't JV until I was much older.
Really?
Yeah. And so my dad went by J Julio Vela because he hated the name Jose. And I was like, well, my dad hates Jose. I'm going to hate Jose too.
Yeah.
So I just kept it as a J.
So when I call you JV, I'm actually not saying the initial J and the initial V. I'm saying JAVY.
Why?
Really?
It's saying J to me in my head.
I have to change your name in my cell phone. I have to change what I refer to you when I text and email people.
Yes.
Okay.
So I used the name Jose though in jury selection.
Okay.
Because I said, hi everybody, my name's Jose. Because I think a lot of number one, it's just easier, right? People see me and they say, I'd imagine they say like Jose, or they say some other Mexican name. Because I'm dark, I'm Hispanic, and this is how it is, and I'm fine and I embrace that.
Okay.
So when I introduce myself to a jury, it's, hey, I'm Jose. Because it's just easy and it's comfortable, and it's, I think in my opinion, it creates an immediate, in their minds, I expect this guy to be named Jose, insert other Hispanic, certain native.
Juan,
right? Antonio, something like that.
Oh, you thought about this. You're really hoping Antonio.
No,
someone out there
I'm okay with
thinking
Jose.
of Antonio.
I'm okay with Jose. I actually, and it blends me in. It's like Joe, right?
Yeah. It's
just Joe.
That's our former president, Tucker Graves. It's always Joe.
Right, he always calls me Tucker.
Joe.
He always calls me Joe. But that's fine. And it creates familiarity and with that. Do you do that at all in Vordaer?
I try to just say Justin.
Right.
I haven't said this publicly before, but I'm a big fan of Dan Cogdell. And I was watching Dan Cogdell speak about jury selection. I think it was like the Enron trial, where he got the only not guilty of anybody. All these high-dollar New York lawyers apparently came down to represent all the other executives. And they were like, well, my name is, I guess they had like New York, when Dan does this, it's much better, but they had like New York accents, and they're like, I'm from, wherever in the Northeast, and you got a federal jury that are all from, as far out as like Walker County and down south and out west, out to Austin County and down to the coast, so locals. And then Cogdell got up and said, my name's Dan, and I'm from Humble, so that's what I try to remember. I try to just be Justin, and I'm from Magnolia,
You are from Magnolia.
I am from Magnolia.
Dude, and so do you ever get to use, that's great.
Whoa.
That's great.
Whoa, I see what you're doing
You're from Magnolia.
Is there a J Julio Vela the third? Is there just senior, junior, and then it just?
There's just senior, junior. It's just I didn't name
kids, right?
I didn't name any of my kids super Mexican because they're half. They're Hispanians. I like call them Hispanians. They're half Asian, half Hispanic. Hispanians, but Cruz, but Cruz is hip though.
Oh, okay.
That's my middle child. Cruz.
Like you're saying your middle child is hip, or like that's a hip name?
He is hip and it's a hip name.
Oh, both. Okay.
Yeah, you know, right. And you know what? He's a little bit darker than Lincoln, our older one, who his name's Lincoln. He turned out to be a little bit wider.
Huh.
Right? It's interesting. Zach's a wild card, and the last one, July, because it's Zachary Julio, because we weren't expecting July. And whenever July looks back and checks us out, right?
She'll be like,
I love you, July, but we didn't know you were gonna have
surprises are the best ever.
And so we named her after Julio, July. I've always liked July anyway.
I do too.
I thought
it's
it
a good name.
In any event, I think when you're relating to people and jurors and crowds, it's good to give them something to expect. They expect something. You give it to them right off the bat, and they open up a little bit more. Versus if I were to go up there and say, you know, my name's Jose Julio Vela, I don't necessarily think, because Houston is such a broad mix of people. Mm-hmm. If I was in the Rio Grande Valley where I grew up, I would not say my name's Jose. I'd say, hey, I'm Jose Julio Vela. It's a big difference between the juries in South Texas, for example, versus in Houston, where I'm just going to be Jose. Mm-hmm. Where if I were to seat a jury, which I have in maybe Montgomery County or other counties that are maybe north that don't have.
You're going to be Joe.
I'm going to be Joe. No, in fact, I'm going to be Jay.
Jay?
I'm going to be Jay, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think that works. I think that's fine, just because of that, and we can just squash that and be done.
Yeah.
You know, so
you don't want the trial to be about you.
That's correct.
Or at least to the extent that you want the jury to trust you and not be hung up on.
Let me ask you
How do
this.
I pronounce your name, or what's your name?
Right.
Or,
exactly.
You know.
Exactly.
Do you ever use that to flesh out potential bias?
I haven't. Yes. However, I don't think I've used it specifically for that. I think it ends up just being ancillary, where I look for it, and if a juror responds, if I'm Jose and they respond, they call me Joe. Depending on the type of case, I'm okay with that, right?
Or if they just call you Juan, like Juan,
Right.
I have a question. Oh,
right,
Juan.
right, and that happens.
I prefer if you're gonna get it wrong, get it Antonio.
Let me ask you this: what things do you use to build bridges to juries? When you are particularly in the deselection process.
So, you know, that's a good question, and I'll take this to talk about something that I've been criticized for, and I'm trying to stop doing because it doesn't come off apparently as genuine. I'm kind of self-deprecating, and I kind of like.
What do you mean by that?
I'll kind of make fun of myself, or I'm like, you know, I'll with a witness or something, I'll tell, like, you know what I like to do? I like to kind of. I don't say dumb things down because I don't want to make the jury sound like I think they're dumb and I'm trying to bring it to their level. But I'll try to be like, you know, I don't really understand concepts, complicated concepts real well. And you know, other people see me in trial, they're like, it's pretty clear like you do understand those complex concepts. And when you say that, it sort of, number one, you lower your authority in front of the jury, and number two, the jury doesn't really buy it. They think you're being disingenuous. So one thing I try to do, that I thought I was trying to do to build bridges, was be self-deprecating and try to like dumb things down. But really I realized that if that's not me, then I'm breaking one of Mark Bennett's cardinal rules, which is always be yourself in jury selection.
Yeah.
So I try to do that, and I am kind of self-deprecating in my general life, but I need to stop doing that in front of juries.
I don't think you are.
Well,
I don't think you are.
I really kind of am.
You're. No, well, so when
I don't know. I mean, what things I do, I try to relate to them. You know, we see this a lot, right? You've talked about this, I think. When during jury selection and DWI, and you always ask somebody, anybody in here been affected by a DWI? And a lot of people have, and it's tragic. I mean, Tragic things happens all the time, and it's really, really tragic when it could have been prevented, and it was caused because someone was just trying to have a good time and they didn't take the steps to be safe and responsible that night, and someone is hurt or killed. That's horrible. And when a juror raises their hand and sometimes tearfully admits that they've lost a loved one or something, you know, I genuinely try to show that I care about that, and that I don't, at least that I don't not care about that. So I try to pause and take a moment. I put down whatever's in my hands, and I say, I'm really sorry to hear that. And that's why these laws are important. And I want it to be very clear that we're not here in defiance of those laws, because those laws are intended to protect us from those kinds of tragedies. And I'm really sorry about that, you know, and then we go into our legal questions. But I cringe when I see prosecutors or any attorney, defense attorneys too, anybody, a judge, it's like, okay, so you lost your son to a DWI. Let me ask you, can you set that aside and be fair in this case? And then you have a mother who's like sitting there wiping tears away about the loss of a son, or a child. So I try to connect I try to be a genuine person in my life. I try to connect with a jury by trying to put aside my nervousness and my anxiety and still try to let myself be true.
You know, trial gurus, some of them subscribe to no PowerPoint. Do you use PowerPoint at all?
I'm kind of like Mark. Now the interesting thing is I've worked on and I have put together a PowerPoint that I'm really proud of. I haven't used it because I prefer to really connect with the jurors. I will pull out pads of paper and draw on them and stand right there and hold them in front of the jury. But Mark Bennett's right. You put up a PowerPoint and you said this I think a few weeks ago. The TVs are just positioned in the most awkward places in the courtroom. So you put up something on the TV screens and all of a sudden no one's going to be looking at you. And if there's something up there for them to either look at and take in or read, they're not even listening to you anymore.
Yeah.
So if I have a couple times used it, and I'll just use a few slides and I'll put it up, and I have to give it a good 60 seconds for everybody to digest it, and I wait for most of the faces to turn back to me, and then I start talking again. And it slows things down, so I don't like that.
Are you using images or are you putting words up there?
I try to use as few words as possible and use images and then talk about what we're seeing, because that's what a trial is going to be, right? They're not going to usually be reading things. They're going to be hearing things from people, and they're going to be processing images of evidence, right?
Do you ever lead with any sort of anecdotes when you're talking to? Do you have a story you like to say when you begin your voir dire?
I have a couple of things. Voir dire in Texas. I have a couple things that I do that I don't really want to say right now out loud, like on TV.
Why don't you want to say them?
Well, because the prosecutors who try cases against me, they can learn it as they try a case against me, and they can talk to each other. But I don't want it to be on YouTube. They're not anything like huge or slick, but they're what I have, and the prosecutors already roll their eyes at me enough, and I don't want them to start doing it as I start my little spiels. But I have a couple things in closing. I have like the little anecdote thing when we talk. Everybody has their burden of proof anecdote, right? And I use like a parachute one. I talk about my great uncle who was a pilot in World War II, and he was actually shot down over Germany. He was a POW in Stalag Luft 4, which was the same prison of war camp that The Great Escape, that movie, was filmed at or set in. He wasn't there during that escape. That was a true story, but he was there, I think, after that. But I use a story about him. My great uncle Richard Guy, who actually lived in Conroe and died a few years ago, was a war vet and an awesome man. I use a story from when I was little, and I interviewed him about his life as a.
Well, how do you relate that to in your closing?
It's jumping out of a plane with a parachute. How do you trust it's going to open? And my uncle was like, well, the first thing they teach us before they teach us to jump out of a plane and not die is to pack a parachute. And I would never jump out of a plane in a parachute I didn't pack myself.
Interesting. And then I go, that's very good.
And then I use this in cases where you've got witnesses where the credibility is just trash. And then I go, what the state's about to ask you to do is they're going to ask you to stand up here in a second and strap on a parachute that witness idiot number 1 and witness idiot number 2 packed themselves, and they just want you to put that parachute on and jump out. And look, if you have that parachute on and you stand there at the door and you think like me when I was in 7th grade interviewing my Uncle Richard Guy, and I was like, well, I'm not going to jump out of this plane. If you hesitate for a second, if you even go, well, wait, who packed this? Even if you're falling out of the plane, you're like, I'm not sure I should be doing this. That's a doubt. And if you're a reasonable person, and we all are, you have a reasonable doubt. And that's a not guilty.
That's good.
That's
real good.
That's one thing I do.
Do you talk about that in Vordaer?
Not a parachute. I talk about reasonable doubt.
Well, sure. I mean, just as my brain's going through it, I would probably plant some sort of seed in it, which you probably already do, and then tie it in and close.
Is that loop theory?
Yes. Keep it open. Yeah.
I'm not as good at that. I would like to be better.
That's good. That's real good. I use PowerPoint, mostly images. Mm-hmm. The only language that's ever on a PowerPoint for me is when I'm generally, right, it's always exceptions to the rule, but it's generally when I'm looking at scaled questions. Do you do any scaled questions in Vordaer?
I do a couple. I do on presumption of innocence, like you're gonna, and on witness credibility. If a witness comes in here, you're gonna start them off a little bit of a head. What I really want to do, and I've talked to Mark Bennett, I don't know why I keep pointing over here. Maybe he should be here. I mean, that's the problem, is Mark Bennett's supposed to be here. And he doesn't always sit in that chair, but anyway, we'll just pretend like Mark Bennett's over there. I would really like to do a Vordaer one day that's nothing but scaled questions.
I've done that.
And don't even get into the case.
I've done that.
Now, how did that go? I mean, it's risky, right?
It's
Because you're relying on the judge and the prosecutor's Vordaer, which usually is not very good when it comes to constitutional rights, Fifth Amendment right, presumption of innocence, beyond a reasonable doubt. They don't always do the job that we would like to do. So how does that go?
I've done it twice, both times with my own questions. I didn't know about the legal attitudes questionnaire, the jury legal attitudes questionnaire, where it's a study where it gives you these questions and you're looking for the most authoritarian individuals to identify them, because those who identify as the most authoritarian are mostly related to, or likely to side with what the government's trying to prove, and therefore are terrible jurors.
Yeah. That's based on like psychological studies,
right.
And behavioral studies.
Interestingly, though, there are articles, and I believe out of the same study, they also have questions that identify the egalitarian individuals who are just like neutral in the middle, and then they also have questions that identify the libertarian individuals. Yeah, it's really good. So, for example, an example of the authoritarian question is, anybody who resists of a crime is guilty of a crime. Or another example would be, if 5 out of 6 people think that they are guilty, then you should be found guilty. Another question would be...
And these are scaled questions, so it's like a scale of 1 through 5, and you're asking the jury to...
Disagree strongly.
1 is disagree, or 5 is agree. And then give a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yes.
And at the end, after several scaled questions, what do you do?
After I ask several scaled questions, I add them up.
Okay.
And then each individual is given a score.
Okay.
That's correct. And the highest scores go. Those are they don't go, but they are identifiers for individuals when it's the tiebreaker. I don't like juror number 5. I don't like juror number 8. Well, what's their score?
Who's got a higher number?
Who's got the higher number? And
that means the study shows that they're more likely to be more authoritarian.
Pro-government. Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's also questions, for example, the egalitarians, where it's like, I've never used the question, so I'm having difficulty recalling one. But the egalitarian
that's stuff like like the quote that's sometimes wrongly attributed to Benjamin Franklin, where it's like it's better to let 99 guilty people go free than wrongly incarcerate one innocent person.
Right.
How strongly?
I want to say that one's actually on the pro-defense, or it's not libertarian, but it's more anti-authoritarian individuals.
Yeah, yeah.
And another example of the anti-authoritarian individuals are minorities are more likely to be arrested than non-minorities.
Okay.
Strongly agree, strongly disagree. Another one is upstanding citizens have nothing to fear from the government.
Okay.
Right. Another one is insurance claims. Most of the insurance. This is another one that's actually authoritarian. interesting, and I want to use this. I took it out of the last slide because last voir dire because I just wasn't necessarily too comfortable using it, but I really want to. It's most of the insurance claims from injuries for injury claims, right? You file an insurance claim, are phony, and it's great. So the first 2 times I used them, I made it my own questions. I didn't know about the legal attitudes questionnaires for the jury that have been studied. I went 1 and 1. I liked both of those juries. I went 1, and there were no questions. There were no talk. It was like, hey,
You just got numbers.
I'm Jose. This is my co-counsel. We represent here. Let's go ahead and start. And it was about 15 questions. One, and we went through it.
Was it weird? I mean, did the jurors?
It was something that nobody had ever seen in the courtroom both times.
Yeah, but did anybody like raise their hand and go like, "Are you gonna just keep doing this, or are you gonna ask questions like they did?"
No,
or, I have a
but
question right now, or
no, but you could tell some of the jurors towards question 12
or tired.
were
of it.
they're about done with that.
Yeah.
Right.
Are those your authoritarian ones, probably?
Maybe. So what I've done now, the very last trial I had, the last week I lost. Well, I didn't
won the
lose.
rights of
I
appeal.
didn't lose. The state, 6 people believe the state proved their case beyond a reasonable doubt.
There you go. It's a good lawyer answer.
I mean, it's true. I don't.
You're right.
I
No,
mean,
you're right. You
they
didn't
were
lose.
out. I mean, yeah, I didn't lose. But I included the authoritarian. I included, I think, 6 of them, and I scattered them throughout the voir dire, in between a story. So the story I tell is, it's not mine, and the voir dire setup was a creation of a few people, and I don't take all credit for it, and by any means.
I'll give you all credit.
Well, it's a story about an individual who gets about a terrible crime, a law enforcement agency who needed to solve the crime goes to the easiest person they can to go down for the crime. With a little bit of prompting and a little bit of police tactics, he falsely commits to the crime. He's brought to court. The court looks at it and realizes that everything they did was a sham, and they just needed to solve this crime, and the case gets thrown out of court. And so the idea is that I sprinkle questions, these questions, the scaled questions throughout the story.
Did you do this a few years ago?
Yes, it's been developing for a while. Not the actual story, but the method.
I feel like I've seen you do this. Or something.
I've done many. I've never gotten to a point to the story that I liked until recently, and that was a collaboration, and it came out with a number of individuals, and it came out, and I've been beta testing it now since May, and we're something like, out of maybe 5 or 6 trials, I've lost 2. So I've had very good juries, 2 or 3. It's had very good results.
Yeah.
Right. And the juries that we're seating in Harris County, in Fort Bend, they end up being 3 women, 3 men,
Sure.
2 Hispanics, 2 whites, 2 blacks.
Yeah.
Very cross section. Not when I was first starting, we would see 6 white individuals.
Yeah.
Or 6 black individuals, or 6
You're like, where am I? In Montgomery County?
Right. I mean, and I think that's extraordinarily important, but to get those individuals. So speaking of juries, some juries have some very difficult things down at the courthouse this week.
They do. I'm glad I'm not on a jury this week.
I agree. I think
or for the last 6 weeks in some of these cases.
Did you go on? Right. When's the last time you did jury service?
Last time I got a summons, which was, 2 years ago?
I just don't. It must be very difficult. I've never actually been able to sit on a jury.
I didn't even get called on a panel.
Yeah, I've been on a panel, but they certainly didn't seat me, and I couldn't help but being the defense lawyer in the panel.
Yeah.
I couldn't help it. I'm like, yeah, you guys suck. Yeah, screw the government. No, I'm very suspicious of cops, and everybody here should be too. You know what I mean?
Are you trying to taint the pool?
So here's the trial. So we got the juries down. So now let's talk about openings. What do you like to hit on openings?
I don't like openings.
Openings are very difficult. Have you started to waive opens at all?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I've done it a few times
what's been
too.
fun, what's been really fun is that lately the prosecutors in Harris County have been waiving their opening, and I've just had a rash lately. Traditionally, we don't usually call witnesses in most like misdemeanor cases, right? We try the state's evidence. A lot of times that's our strategy in misdemeanor court. Lately, I've just kind of had a few misdemeanor cases where I've got witnesses to call, and I don't have to tell the state because they're not experts.
Yeah.
And even if they were, they didn't get assigned motion because they keep filing motions with orders even though they don't have to. But anyway, the state waived opening like 2 of my last jury trials.
You know, if they waive opening, you can't open.
Unless you put on a case.
Right. Okay, fair.
So
yeah,
they didn't know I had witnesses. Now, they also thought that just by them waiving opening, even if I had witnesses, that I didn't get to give an opening. I don't get to give an opening.
I didn't know that. Right, that's a very good distinction.
And so it was so much fun because the judges in these 2 courts knew, nope, if you calling witnesses, Justin? I'm like, yep, I have a case to put on. They're like, oh no, he gets to give an opening statement. So now I get to give an opening statement after the state's closed and arrested their case. They haven't closed yet, but they've arrested their case. And they waived openings. They haven't gotten to actually talk to the jurors since voir dire.
Yeah.
They haven't gotten to talk to the jurors about the case. And now they've just heard from witnesses. And now I get to come up and basically do an opening statement after the state's already finished their case, which does involve it's kind of hard to avoid some argument, in the opening.
Yeah.
And then I get to call my first witness.
You've had misdemeanor prosecutors waive open?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Twice this year.
Really?
Yeah.
FCLD cases?
No, one was a vehicular crimes and one was a regular DWI trial.
Waiving open. Mm-hmm. What are they getting all ballsy down there?
They were. They
getting all
were so
ballsy or
smug.
what?
They were like, "No, Judge, we waive our opening," and I was just like, "Oh, okay, cool." And then state rests, and the judge will be like, "Mr. Harris, call your first witness." I go, "Oh, Judge, actually, I have a opening statement to give." Judge, no, we waived opening. Like, right, but under the rules, if you've waived opening, once you rest, if I do have a case in chief to put on, now if I don't have any witnesses, that's a different thing. But if I'm going to call a witness, I get to do an opening statement. So then, as someone who thrives on control in the courtroom, now it's my show. I basically kind of start everything over. I hope we get to take a little break, and then I come in and it's opening statement. You know what the evidence is going to tell you? And the juror's like, haven't we already heard some evidence? It's like, no. The evidence is going to show blah, 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 blah. And now in the juror's mind, at least in my mind, in the juror's minds, there's a little bit of a reset.
Yeah.
Versus if we just went from opening to state's case to defense case to closing, it's like all the way through. But when I'm in the middle of this, I get to stand up and just kind of spout off and tell them what I think the evidence is about to show or what I think the evidence has already shown or not shown. I feel like it's kind of like a reset.
I didn't.
And I'm 50-50 on.
I can't believe they're waiving opens and misdemeanors. That's pretty cool.
It is. I mean,
if they know the rules.
Yeah, if they know the rules and if they have a good strategic reason for doing it, but if they're just doing it to try to mess with me, it's not really working too well for them.
Once again, it's HCCLA Reasonable Doubt. Phone number 713-807-1794. What's our time, Justin?
We're right at the halfway mark, right?
Are we? I just made that up.
8:29.
Look at that. We've been doing this for so long. I didn't even know what time it was.
Call in and ask JV any question about his personal life and his background. We've already heard that you married your high school sweetheart. So that's so sweet and endearing, and y'all have 4 kids together who have cute names like Lincoln and July and Cruz. What's the other one?
Zachary.
Zachary, that's right.
Zach is a hoot, man.
Zach Attack.
Is
he number 3?
He's number 3. He'll go up to his older brothers and just hit them and be like, "What? What you gonna do? You gonna do something about it?"
And that's when you step in and go, "We don't hit people," right?
That's what I tell my Cruz. See, Cruz is a big guy. Cruz is 5, but he's about Lincoln's size. He's 7, and he's big. And Cruz, but he's very sensitive. Mm-hmm. Very sensitive.
Teddy bear?
It's teddy bear. So I always tell Cruz, I say, "Cruz, hit him back. Hit him back. Hit him back." So
call in for parental advice. Call in for questions about JV, whatever you want. JV's here for it.
So let's talk about. So let's just kind of talk about a trial and defenses. I recently had a trial where I used reasonable discipline defense. The reasonable discipline defense.
Parent.
So,
Okay, yeah.
so as an overview, the idea is that in the state of Texas, the law says you can use reasonable discipline. An individual is justified in committing an assault against another so long as you're a parent or acting as a parent and the actions that you did are reasonable. Now, under the law, there's a standard of what's reasonable or what's not reasonable and how the jury's supposed to view it. But that's the general principle of it.
Okay.
In the panel, there was 30 some odd people. There was 29 individuals, and 29 of them, their gut instinct was like that you cannot touch your child.
Really?
Period. You cannot spank at them. They drew the line at yelling. Now, granted, I don't hit my kids, but
You just have them hit each other.
right, I'm like, hit them back. But the idea to that to me was crazy. I did not, and it was
29 jurors.
Overwhelming. Their initial.
Here in Harris County?
Yes, and we had to go back, and I had to go and talk to every single one of them to be like, hey, let's bring it back. Let's see what the deal is. And sure enough, we are able to seat a jury just barely. But you can't touch your kids.
Really?
You're going to end up like my client. You're going to end up like a guy on trial for disciplining his kids. Now, granted, 6 people felt the discipline wasn't reasonable, but, that the state did not disprove beyond a reasonable doubt that the actions were reasonable. But I was amazed by that. You can't, they were like, no spanking.
That's...
Take away the phone was most of their...
Really?
Yeah. Take away the phone. That's just amazing to me. And in the state of Texas, the law allows you to reasonably discipline your child.
Physically.
Yeah. A lot of individuals, though, said that, look, just because the child is a child and then let's say they turn 17, 18, you no longer can do that to a human. And so why is it any different? How is it any different to put your hands physically on a child? If we're just walking down the street and I pinch somebody's arm, that could be considered a Class C assault.
Or Class A assault.
Or Class A, because if they felt pain.
They felt pain.
Right. How is it that delicate when we're dealing with adults, yet for children, you can hit them reasonably? Right? And it made me step back a little bit. It made me say like, whoa, maybe.
I get that. Okay, but I have 2 things. There are some adults who need to be bent over somebody's knee and spanked, number 1, right?
Fair.
And number 2, I guess the thought process, and I'm not a child psychologist, and I have a 9-month-old who I've never had to discipline, because she's perfect and she never needs discipline.
Of course, right, of course.
Almost as perfect as her mother, Diane. But
points.
She, but some of the thought process is like, well, I'm spanking you because you're a child to correct behavior, so that when you're an adult, you're not a total S-bag, I was going to say a bad word, but our engineer's not looking, so I won't say it. But when you're sitting here telling me that the worst discipline that 29 of the parents said that they would do to their kids is take away their cell phone, I'm thinking, how attached are they to their cell phone? Let me put my cell phone away. And what the hell are they going to be like when they're 35 years old? You
can't touch them. You can't. And not that I hit my kids, but
I was spanked.
I was beat. No, I wasn't, Mom. I love you. I was disciplined, man. I was disciplined. And
so was I. And I, I think I'm okay.
You can't touch your kid, though, man. It's all these millennials out here. Take away their phone, sit them in the corner.
We're millennials.
Well, we're the...
Oh, yeah, but you don't spank.
Well, fair enough, but...
So you're part of the problem?
No, but I still believe that sometimes, sometimes you got to discipline your kid, I suppose. I mean, I haven't been... My kids are just, I guess...
How old is your oldest?
7.
Does he have a cell phone?
Yes.
Oh, my God. How old is the one right below?
5.
Does he have a cell phone?
Yes.
How old is Zach?
3. soon to be 3.
Does your 2-year-old have a cell phone?
Oh, he's 3. He's gonna be 4. Pardon me. Yeah, 3.
Okay, does your 3-year-old have a cell phone?
Yeah.
Does July have
He has a tablet.
July was born after Taylor, my 9-month-old. How old is July?
9 months, 10 months.
Okay. Does July have a cell phone?
A fake one.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Okay, so we have to figure out when all this stuff started so we can know when the mark of civilization started the downward trend. I've already decided, like, Taylor is not getting a cell phone until she's like 22 and out of the house.
This is what you say, bro.
No,
This is what you say. Yeah, we'll watch when you're trying to eat dinner, okay? And the only thing that kid is gonna be, that it's gonna work, is if you give him your cell phone.
Okay, I will admit, like, when I put my cell phones on the sofa, and they're just off, and they're just like inanimate objects to what they should be is just inanimate. They are inanimate objects to a 9-month-old. The screens aren't on. There's no lights flashing. It's not making sounds. When she notices them, she's just like crawling straight for them.
So she sees how interested Daddy and Mommy are.
There's gotta be like Oh, maybe it's that we're always like staring at them and stuff, but it's like there's like electronic crack waves coming off.
YouTube, bro. YouTube is the best babysitter ever created.
Now, I will say, there's a 8-hour-long looping lullaby on YouTube that has like 31 million hits, and I think like 5 million of them are ours, because Taylor goes to sleep to that every night, but it's across the room. She can't touch it.
I'm telling you, bro, just wait. Man. Just wait till you go out to eat, and you're like, I'm trying to eat, be quiet, and you just give them the phone.
Here's the phone. Here's the phone.
Yeah. Yeah. To be fair, none of my kids' phones, they have to be connected to Wi-Fi. They don't have their own data plan.
Oh, okay.
So
it doesn't cost you any money.
Right. So they're just surfing.
Cell phones.
I recently bought them a Google Chromebook.
Oh, okay.
All about it. Okay. All about it. Huge motor skills, I think, at least.
Okay. I did know. I felt like Diane and I became parents, like officially, because I felt this way about 3 weeks ago, maybe not even 3 weeks ago. Taylor had been asleep. She's an awesome sleeper. She'd been asleep for a couple hours. And Diane and I were just doing stuff in the living room or in the house, and I just looked up and I was like, huh, I think we're officially parents, because Peppa the pig has been on for 3 hours and the kid's been asleep. And I was like, so now we're officially parents when Peppa the pig, which I didn't know existed 10 months ago.
Peppa's huge.
And yeah, Peppa's huge. And actually, I would sit there and start watching. I'm like, this is not terrible. This is not terrible.
Do you ever include any imagery from the media or movies or TV into your voir dire or trials?
Yes. So there's a great clip for voir dire where you want to like talk about misperception and things from Martin Lawrence's movie. Oh my God, National Security.
I haven't seen that.
Okay, so there's a scene in the beginning of it where Steve Zahn, the actor, is playing a police officer, and Martin Lawrence is. Now I play it on mute because if you play it, there's bad language, and there's also it doesn't really work for us really well because Martin Lawrence is actually doing something illegal, but it actually doesn't look like it. But it looks like Martin Lawrence is breaking into a car, which he claims is his own car, and Steve Zahn's just on patrol, and he stops, and he starts kind of hassling Martin Lawrence's character. And Martin Lawrence is a black actor, Steve Zahn's a white actor, and they're playing a white cop and a black man. And this Martin Lawrence is like, Martin Lawrence calls Steve Zahn the B word. And Steve Zahn starts to arrest him, or at least detain him, and then this bee starts flying around. And they both see the bee, and they're like trying to duck from the bee, and then Steve Zahn starts like swinging at the bee, and there's a family having a picnic like 100 yards away in a park.
That's wonderful.
And the dad, this is the 90s,
That's
so
wonderful.
the dad's got this camcorder that's like, way bigger than my cell phone. And he's like videotaping his kids, and then all of a sudden, like the mom points silently over at like Steve Zahn and Martin Lawrence, and now Steve Zahn's got his baton out, and he's trying to hit this bee. But from their perspective, and from when the camera's close, you can tell like there's a little bee, and both Martin Lawrence and Steve Zahn are looking at this. But when they show the family's perspective, and the dad's now taking the camcorder and turned it at Martin Lawrence and Steve Zahn, it looks like this cop with a baton is beating a black man, and Martin Lawrence falls down, and the baton is going more and more. And then it fast forwards in the movie, and just this 45-second clip. I'm taking way too long to explain it. Then it fast forwards and it's like people in a bar and they're watching the camcorder footage and it's like, rogue cop or some headline. And, but the great thing is I have to rely on my millennials in the jury because most jurors have not seen national security. And I'm like, all right, anybody seen national security?
I've never seen national security.
But I'll play that clip. And I'll put it on mute, and I'll play it, and I'm like, all right, so you've seen it, right? All right, juror number 14, tell everybody else what's going on right now. And they're like, oh, Martin Lawrence trying to get in his car, and they walk through it. And I'm like, and now what does it look like? Well, it looks like he's getting, like Steve Zahn's beating him with the baton, and he's not, right?
That's good.
But it looks like that, and you can understand, you don't want to blame the family for thinking that the cop is beating up the guy who he comes across, but we all know now, later on, when we come in and we get to hear from Steve Zahn and we get to hear from Martin Lawrence, we get to hear from the dad with the camcorder as witnesses in a trial. That's what we rely on the 6 jurors or the 12 jurors to sort through what actually happened and realize this was a mistake. So I do use that one.
I use for I'm gonna steal that, Justin.
Do it.
what I use for
someone else, I think Wade Smith gave me that idea.
Wade, I'm gonna use it because that's brilliant. What I've done for voir dire, for misconceptions or misperceptions or points of view, I do images regarding that will show camera tricks. So one of them is this soldier with his mouth open, and these people are jumping out of a helicopter into his mouth, right? And we all laugh like this guy's huge, he's really big, but in reality it's a camera trick, and they know that. The other one is I have this lady who looks like she's running up invisible stairs, but she's just about to move, right? That's another one. The other one I have is I put up the old lady or young woman picture.
Oh,
right?
yeah,
right?
Yeah, the MC Escher looking thing.
And the other one I do is Albert Einstein or Marilyn Monroe. I don't know
what do you do
with
with the MC Escher one? Or the Albert Einstein and Marilyn Monroe? Because I've seen other people do that because it's a psychological test too.
I don't know about that. Talk to me about that, that part of it.
I've heard that there's something about like when you put that in front of people, there are certain people who just can't see one of the women. They can only see another one, and supposedly that means something.
That's interesting. I'm going to have to look into that.
Yeah,
I typically just use it as a demonstrative for perceptions and how you see things.
Okay.
There's another one that has an elephant. You can't count the elephant's legs.
That's
like
right.
4 or 5,
yeah.
right? I use that one a lot. I haven't recently.
Those are fun in jury selection, right?
They're fun because it breaks the icebreaker. People
and everyone starts talking to each other.
Yeah,
and I see it, right? Like, okay.
The other one is it a pink and gray shoe or a silver and gold shoe?
The dress, the blue.
Oh, the blue, right, or the dress one, right?
Dress or whatever.
Yeah, I use that a lot.
I still don't get that. I look at that picture and I'm like, it's a blue dress.
Whatever it is that I see is definitely what I always see. I don't know if it's pink or blue. I don't really remember. Or gray. I don't remember, but.
Such a weird thing.
Well, it causes jurors to start to talk about.
Yeah.
And to look at perceptions. I do those, and it incorporates the scaled questions and PowerPoints. But most of my PowerPoints are images. And then recently I've introduced an anecdote that I'm very happy with.
What is it? Lay it on us.
Hi, my name is Jose. I, along with Justin Harris, represent Mark. See,
Poor Mark.
Represent Mark. I love to read. And one of my favorite books is John Steinbeck's East of Eden. And in that book, he introduces us to a character by the name of Constable Mike. See, Constable Mike was charged with the task of investigating the murder of 2 parents and the disappearance of their young, beautiful daughter, Kathy. Faced with limited resources and immense community pressure, he went to the easiest guy he could find to go down for the crime. John Steinbeck writes that the constable finds this bumbling halfwit with a little bit of prompting and his willingness to try to help the police. He confesses to everything. And because probable cause is such a low standard, this bumbling halfwit is arrested, indicted, and brought to court. John Steinbeck writes that he was brought before a judge who had canceled a lot of wickedness in his life, out of the world. And with a little bit of scrutiny, he realized that the confession was nonsense, the investigation was a sham, and he threw the case out of court. And later on, when the judge saw the constable, he called him. He said, "Constable Mike, come over here. You shouldn't have done a thing like that. Somebody almost pled guilty to something that you didn't have enough proof of." Constable Mike, being the good officer that he is, said, "Well, Judge, I had to solve the crime, and he said he did it." And the judge looked at the constable and said, "Constable Mike, the law was designed to save, not to destroy." And so through that anecdote, we talk about burdens, we talk about investigations,
Sure.
we talk about credibility, we talk about bias, we talk about courts and prior jury service. And then we talk about the law was designed to save, not to destroy. Let's talk about some things on how the law was designed to save. Then we immediately roll into burden, beyond reasonable doubt, presumption of innocence.
That saves us from.
Right, and we say,
Okay.
who was? And so one of the rollover question is, so who was the law designed to? The law was designed to save us from whom, or from what? And then some individuals will say, well, other people. That's right. Why? Because other people lie. The government. That's right. Why? Because the government is. I'm suspicious of the government. Correct. Other things, and so depending on the type of case, I add this other slide. It's called the Kathy slide. You know who the law was designed to save us from? People like this. And the next slide is just a picture. It's a silhouette of a young girl. Turns out, this story has a twist. John Steinbeck writes that their daughter, the one that disappeared, Kathy, murdered her parents, faked her death, and disappeared because she hated her life and hated everything around it and had to get out and get away. Right? For months, she oiled the house up. For months, she put any sort of drafts, she sealed them with cotton. So that way, all it would take is a single match for the house to go up in flames. And right before that, she killed a chicken, slit its throat, and put blood next to her bed. She lit the match, took off, never to be seen. We go into motives. Will we ever know why people lie? No. Well, who here knows individuals who've lied and done these kind of things? How is the law designed to save us from people like this? Pop, reasonable doubt, presumption of innocence.
All right.
Those things, right?
Yeah.
So we go, and so through that story, I'm littering in scaled questions, right? And I'm finding the authoritarians. Through that story, I'm finding out who's related to law enforcement. Who here? We're done with Constable Mike. Who here is related to law enforcement? Friends or family? Pop, 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 pop. Who here has been a victim of a crime? Who here has been falsely accused of a crime? Who's ever had a bad experience with law enforcement? So I'm weaving in all of these things through this story.
Yeah.
For beyond reasonable doubt, I'd like to do a few things. One of them I consider, I think maybe I talked about it last time, but I talk about it being a pack. And so a guard dog, right? So I say, with reasonable suspicion, you have to get past this guard dog, and it's a Chihuahua, right? For probable cause, you got to get past this guard dog, right? In order for the government to get there. It's an English bulldog. In order for the government to get past clear and convincing, you got to get past this guard dog, and it's a Rottweiler. In order to get to proof beyond reasonable doubt, you got to get past this pack, and it's all the dogs together, and they're guarding beyond reasonable doubt, right?
Your black cube.
Right. For example, and I have the cube, and so the cube's with me the entire time too.
Yeah.
And so that's how I try to identify individuals who I think are going to suck on my jury. But it didn't work this last time.
That's good. I walked into court 6 a week or two ago.
Yeah.
And you weren't there, but there was a black obsidian cube on the desk. And I went over and spun it, and I looked up at Judge Andrews, and I was like, "Judge, J.V. Vela in trial in here?" And she's like, "Yeah, that's his reasonable doubt."
Yeah.
Like, yep.
It's deep and dark.
It is.
It's reasonable doubt.
It's heavy, man.
And it's heavy.
What is that, a paperweight, like in real life?
It's actually,
What is it?
I don't know. It's an obsidian cube.
Okay.
I mean, it could be paperweight.
It work. It won't get away from it.
No, it could be paperweight. And in close, so we do direct and cross. We develop our themes. And in close, what are some things that you like to? I love your story about the parachute.
Yeah.
I think that's amazing. It's wonderful.
I haven't used it in a while. Maybe I should.
I'm gonna bring that up too.
A few months or a few trials. I mean.
I'm gonna bring that up too. One of the things I saw Dan Cogdill do is he puts, for reasonable doubt, he'll put a shack. He'll say they have to prove that you live in a mansion, right? And it's a shack.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's a suburban home,
Mm-hmm.
and that's like clear and convincing. And then it's a mansion, and that's proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And he says, what did they bring you, right? What did they actually bring you?
Right.
If you're buying a mansion and they brought you this shack, it's
You're not buying
ridiculous,
it,
right?
yeah.
And it goes the same thing with like amateur athlete, like dad athlete, amateur athlete, professional athlete.
Sure.
Same thing with cars is another thing that he's done. Court Akers did a really good Vordara that I saw. I wanted to see Jordan Lewis. Jordan Lewis was in trial today.
Oh, was he?
He's coming off the heels on a not guilty. Congrats, Jordan.
Yeah. Been getting quite a few of those.
I think, regardless of anything else, he has the most not guilties in Harris County.
Oh yeah.
He just does, and so that's what it is. I wouldn't characterize him. I know there's issues within the defense bar as to whether or not, to title him as the winningest lawyer, or this or that. But the reality is, Jordan Lewis has more not guilties than anybody else in the county. That's just how it is.
Yeah.
Now, granted, there's going to be arguments that they're DWIs and not capital murders, but that's fine. I mean, that's up for debate.
Yeah,
whatever. But what I'm trying to get at is I saw him in trial today doing a Vordar, and I wanted to go see and hear what he had to say, because I'm sure he has some really good stuff. He's talked about Vordar a few times in lectures. Maybe we can have him on the show at some
Yeah,
point.
we need to. What court is he in?
Must have been 8.
8? Oh,
Judge
okay.
Bynum.
Good court to try a case in.
I agree. Have you tried anything in front of Judge Bynum yet?
We picked. I think I had the honor of picking a jury on his first trial, and then we busted the panel.
What kind of case was it?
DWI.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
It was real early in January, or no, it was real early in his tenure or his time on the bench. It was in January, and it was like the week of MLK Day, I feel like, and so we didn't have a very big panel. So he was thinking we would get by with just, I think, like 26 or maybe 30, but yeah, it busted.
Other things that have been happening, they witness, let's just change topics for a second, change gears.
Yeah, we wanted to talk about this.
Yeah, go for it.
You're talking about the Geiger case,
yeah,
right?
okay, yeah, right.
Yeah, one of the star witnesses who supposedly heard was Botham Jean's neighbor, supposedly heard the lack of conversation or whatever exchange happened between Geiger and Jean before she shot and killed him in his own home. He was apparently, I always take media reports about criminal cases with a grain of salt because I've never seen them be very accurate. But apparently he was living in fear for his life the entire time the trial was going on, and when it was over with, and then he was shot and killed outside his apartment in Dallas last week.
It was either a random act of violence, it was white racists, or it was black racists, or it was white racist cops, or it was cops. I think it was white racist cops. That's what I think. I think white racist cops were pissed that one of their people went down and they went out and killed this boy.
Yeah. So
that's
once
my
again,
opinion.
Just remember at the end of the show, you read all the way through the credits, and it says that the views expressed on the show are those of not those of HCCLA or all of the hosts. But I don't know.
It had to have either been Nazis or pissed off cops, and it ain't gonna be black pissed off cops. It's gonna be white cops, or it's gonna be white racist, or it's gonna be another black man just going down, getting shot in the parking lot because of crime, right? right?
All right, so I'm not
It's
afraid
just too coincidental. It's too
I
coincidental,
agree. I
man.
agree.
It's too
very
coincidental.
coincidental. It's very coincidental. I think it's okay. I'll stay in safe land. It's either because of his involvement in the Botham Jean. What's her name? Geiger, something Geiger. What's her first name? Helen, not Helen. Susan.
I don't know.
Anyway, former officer Geiger and Mr. Jean. It's either related to that, his involvement in that, or it's not.
Right.
So
I think it is.
if it's related to it, I think it is too.
Okay, if it's related to it,
what was the killer's motive?
pissed off. They're pissed off.
But
It's
what if
either
it's somebody
cops or-
who's like pissed off that like he got the spotlight and like they didn't, you know?
I think it's
what
either
if it's a jealousy
either,
thing.
It's either
or-
cops that are pissed off that this dude put another cop behind bars, or it's
You don't think that we're at a day and age where cops are just not that brazen anymore? I agree that historically people who've been put in positions of
Dude.
power have abused that, probably to the point where they've killed people for vengeance, okay? But do you still think that a current, former, wannabe, whatever, Dallas police officer, or we're not associating an agency, really thought I could gun down an eyewitness in a hugely high-profile case and get away with it?
is it me, or are there no suspects?
Yeah, you're right. There are no
Like
suspects.
it's the like.
And who knows how to kill somebody and not have
Yeah.
suspects? It's probably people
Just
who just
saying.
investigate killers all the time.
Call me conspiracy, but I'm just saying. I don't know. I hope it's not. But dude, we just had goings, man.
Yeah,
I mean, this stuff happens. Training day.
yeah.
Like this stuff happens. I think it's just too coincidental, man.
I agree.
It is it's too coincidental, and you know what? And also the guy just came in as a witness.
Yeah.
It's a real deal.
I did see, though, I don't know why, this is why I can't watch crime dramas on TV or Law and Order kind of stuff anymore, is because no one dresses like they do in court on that. And I saw like the clips from him when he testified.
The Dragon Ball Z shirt?
Yeah, he's wearing Dragon Ball Z t-shirt. I loved it.
Dude,
I loved it.
I'm keeping my mouth shut on there because God rest his soul, rest in peace.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I don't mean that in any disrespect to him.
He was
but-
wearing Dragon Ball Z?
Yeah, I was like, that's real.
It made
That's
me
real.
think that this guy was a nice guy.
Oh, of course he was.
He was cool.
Of course he was, and it took some guts to do that.
I agree.
So either way, it's a tragedy. I hope you're right that. I agree with you that I hope it was not motivated because of his involvement in the case, because there's no way that that's ever a good thing. There's not a good excuse for murder, but God, I really hope that it's not because of something like that.
With that being said, go Astros. Go Stros.
Yep, go Stros.
HCCLA. Kicking butt. See you next week. Justin Harris.
Maybe I'll be here.
Yeah, of course you're going to be here.
All right.
Adios, amigos.